The original version of this video was uploaded to Jason Verney's YouTube channel, where it and many other videos, podcasts, snippets and films can be found. That channel can be found at youtube.com/Jason Verney. This is the Not So Korean podcast, and I am Jason Verney.
And this is Timothy Holm.
In this podcast series, we talk to one another, and sometimes with special guests, about
what we know about Korea,
what we don't know about Korea,
what we want to know about Korea,
and occasionally, what we don't want to know about Korea. Recording live from UK's Koreatown itself, an area in and around New Malden, yes, that's the largest Koreatown and Korean community in Europe, we will start this episode off with a quick summary of the last few days and what we've been up to. So let's start with you, Tim, for a change.
Yeah.
What have you been up to?
Well, recently I was listening to a musician / comedian called Sue Lee.
Oh yeah, you've been raving about
Yeah,
her.
you heard about her? I actually did a little post about this on our Instagram.
Yeah.
You can find her on Instagram at Sue Lee Susu, and she's from South Korea, but she also lived in the UK for quite a while. Her English is like fluent. So I don't know if you listen to any of her songs.
I've only checked out
yeah.
one or two.
Yeah, but most of them are all in English. Actually, I was quite surprised by it, and I mean, she's like really good at talking about sort of
issues.
Yeah, serious issues like depression, anxiety. Things that people have been going through during the pandemic. Being locked at home and stuff like that. But she does it in a very humorous and upbeat kind of way,
And she's only just come to light more.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
she does have, I guess, around 100,000 followers now or something on YouTube. But yeah, I mean, she became more popular recently in the media. Like, for example, The Guardian in the UK, the newspaper, they did an article about her this past week.
Yes, is that where you kind of
yeah, that's where I first heard about her. Actually, I think it was I can't remember. A friend of mine in Korea, I think, posted something about her, but she's been appearing in a bunch of other magazines and things recently. So
oh right, yeah, she wouldn't have that many
attention.
Yeah, she can't get that many subscribers or followers without doing something. But yeah, it sounds like she's doing good.
It's definitely not like K-pop stuff.
No, it sounds
really
like she's
good music,
genuine,
actually, and well written.
And it's from the heart. It sounds like comedy and music. Oh, cool.
So I recommend you check out some of that. I mean, just on YouTube, her channel is called Sue Lee, nothing else. SULEE. Yeah. So, and also one other thing was yesterday, Arrow. Do you know Arrow Films?
Yeah, I love what Arrow do. I buy some things off iTunes for what they do, but I know you're more of a physical man at the moment.
Yeah,
as such.
So if you're into Korean cinema or Asian cinema, Arrow Films, they release quite a lot of Asian films.
Yeah.
And this past Monday, they released a new edition of A Tale of Two Sisters, a Korean film.
Kim Ji-woon?
Kim Ji-woon was the director, and starring, I have to remember, Moon Gun-young was one of the actresses. And the other girl. I forgot her name, but she's also one of my favorite actresses, but I should remember. Anyway, you can find it while I'm talking, maybe, but...
No, it's okay. I was actually going to find something related to this, but carry on what you're saying, because you're going to talk about the extras.
So they released a Blu-ray disc, and also they released the film on their new Arrow player, which is like this digital streaming
I get the
player.
emails from them, actually,
and I think it's arrow-player.com, I believe, is the website.
Okay. And
so you can find the movie on there, but the interesting thing about this edition, and by the way, the Korean title is Janghwa Hongyeon, Yeah.
Yep.
And so the interesting thing about this edition is that it has some new special features on it, so that haven't been released before, including a new audio commentary by Pierce Conran, who's a Korean film critic. I mean, he's not Korean, but he's a critic in Korea.
Yeah, he's often on Arirang TV, and he's on. I've actually kind of met up with him a couple of times in Korea, and he does a lot for that, and he's in modern Korean cinema. He writes for. By the way, the actress I think you were thinking of is there.
Im Soo-jung.
That's it. Yeah.
Yes, Im Soo-jung. Sorry for forgetting her name, because she's really a great
actress. She could be listening. Yeah, it's probably unlikely right now.
We can dream. Right?
Maybe. Yeah. Well, it's funny you should mention that, because there was there's something that there's a film expert in the UK called Jin Hee Choi, and she's on Twitter quite a lot, and she's basically she knows her stuff about Korean film, and she posted something in the last several hours actually, and she said that she's just received a load of old sort of Korean classics DVDs. You were talking about Blu-ray there, weren't you? Yes, but she received a 1972 version of A Tale of Two Sisters, which kind of I have to admit I was actually surprised about. But apparently, you were saying it is because it is based on an original story.
Yeah, it's sort of like a folk tale, I believe, or like a myth or something like that from Korea. So, and actually, there is another interesting fact about the new Blu-ray edition is they have a booklet that comes with it, and in the booklet there's a new translation of the original Korean folktale in that booklet.
Oh right, sounds nice.
So if you want to know more about the original story, that it's in there, and it should be interesting to read that. I was not aware of the 72 version, but I would like to see that as well. But anyway, so the version I'm talking about is the 2003 version. And you've seen the film, have you, Jason?
Which one? Sorry, the
2003 version of A Tale of Two Sisters.
You know what? I can't recall. I know it sounds terrible because it's a classic you've got to see, but I'm pretty... I say this with other films as well, but when it becomes... When you see that many Korean films and they go back 10 years, I can't always remember. And I think if I saw it, it would have been one of the early ones I saw in the KCC.
Yeah, sure.
That's what I imagine.
I mean, it is considered sort of already like a modern classic of the Korean New Wave cinema.
Again,
and I mean, it's not for everybody, because it is kind of a horror film or like a mystery thriller type of film.
Yeah, but saying that, I've asked people that aren't in Korean culture as such, and they've said to me they love The Tale of Two Sisters. So it's a bit like Old Boy, it's kind of one of those films.
It's very stylish film, like the art direction and the cinematography. Everything's really amazing.
He's done a lot of films, hasn't he?
I definitely recommend that if you haven't seen it yet, or if you want to see these new bonus features, which sound really interesting.
I'll tell you one person who's probably has seen... Well, I'd be interested to know whether he's actually seen the 1972 version.
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure about that. But
Paul Quinn?
Yeah, I think he probably loves this movie, yeah.
Yeah, and just to mention, because we mentioned in last week's episode, Paul Quinn has got a talk coming up, a Zoom talk. I think tickets are selling fast. They're not selling, it's completely free, sorry.
Yeah,
Spaces are going fast, but Hangul Celluloid is his website, hangulcelluloid.com. But he's got an event called Off the Wall, Korean Movies Outside of the Mainstream, and that's coming up on the 24th of August. But basically, I just wanted to mention that because he's a really good person, and he does so much for Korean cinema.
How can people register for that if they want to?
It's event. I would say if you can search on Eventbrite, but even better than that, I think if you go to London Korean Links Facebook group, it was recently posted on there, and that's probably the best place to not only find the event and click through, but to also find loads of stuff about Korean culture in the UK or related. How would you suggest?
Right, so that's coming next Tuesday, August 24th, right? At 6:30
Yeah, so it's not long
PM.
now,
Yeah.
but hopefully there's still spaces. Often with Eventbrite, you can put if they have run out of spaces, then you can often put a reserve. You might get a, what's the word? You might get notification.
Yeah, right. In case
I think it's quite rare though, actually.
Yeah,
but,
right. On the waiting list or something.
That's it. Yeah.
Necessary.
So
that's supported by the British Korea Society, is that right?
Yeah, that's it. British Korean, which used to be the Anglo-Korean Society.
Right. So that should be really interesting. I look forward to that too. Yeah. How about you, Jason? Anything else you want to share?
Okay, so a couple of things that I've been up to relating to Korea. We had, this is a bit more sombre, sorry.
Okay.
I'll have a slightly more upbeat story in a minute. My opinion anyway. Basically, for anyone who knows me, I've been sort of an activist for the Sewol ferry tragedy, which happened in April 2014. And every month since then, we've been having a meet-up, or we've been standing in solidarity because of the victims. It used to be called Stay Put, because that's what the children, the 250 plus children that passed away in the water. There's a lot of controversy surrounding that. But anyway, we have one every month. If it's not in person, it's a Zoom call. And we have it normally on the 16th of every month, and we have it it's normally at 4:15. I think it used to be like 16:14. I think I can't remember the actual time. Sorry, it's all relevant to the numbers that were involved. Anyway, we had that, and we talked about a lot what's going on with the current situation, and we it's now been 7.5 years since that. So that was that. That's always a big thing in my calendar. You actually came along to one of them, didn't you?
Yeah, I was honored to join you guys once in New Malden, actually. It was, 2 years ago now?
Yeah, it's just before, I mean, we used to call these protests, demonstrations, but really they're now memorials, we send the families details of what we've been doing most months, and just send them our love, really. So it wasn't just children that affected, but it's mostly children. I mean, the captain jumped ship as well. Excuse my language.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a whole episode just talking.
Well, we probably will
at some point.
And in fact, we probably will at some point. But that'll be in the future. And the other bit of news, which was this. Now you have to bear with me for this, because it might sound like it's related to a different country, not Korea, but I will come to why this relates to Korea. But myself and Tim, we took our first trip to a town around New Malden, near Worcester, a bit further than Worcester Park. So it's kind of in the Sutton area, and it's called Cheam. Right. But it's actually, you could say this is all a part of the Korean community, because I think it all stretches out to pretty much there anyway. But the strangest thing happened. We went to this brilliant Thai restaurant called Chim's. Chim's Thai, it's called on Instagram. Not Chim. We thought it was
not to be confused with Chim.
Yeah, right. It's Chim, but with an apostrophe S to Chim's. And we went in there, had a great conversation, great meal, and I happened to be wearing a T-shirt from some particular person that I follow on YouTube. And this person is actually, he's lived in Seoul, he's lived in Korea, his wife is Korean, and they've got a child as well. Oh, she's no longer a child, she's going to university. But he used to have a reggae bar in Seoul. But now he's called Retired Working For You, and he's got a massive channel on YouTube. But he basically, I was wearing a T-shirt related to that, because he gives away stuff. And it was actually spotted when we were in there, and it was quite touching, because he's so well known that yes, he's not Korean, his parts of his family are, and also he lived in Korea. Right. But it was touching. It was you were there anyway. It's a surreal moment for me.
Somebody recognized your shirt. And what was the shirt?
Well, exactly? that's going to sort of stretch the story a bit, but the shirt is basically, it says awkward. And now that's just because one of his good friends produces his T-shirt. Right. It's about being awkward. In other words, don't be awkward. It's about being yourself. Yeah. And basically that's become in every single one of his videos, pretty much, he wears that T-shirt or a variation of that colour. And so, it was interesting, because one of the people in there was British and the other one was Thai, but they said, Chris Parker. And it was very, so, I mean, there's three links to Korea there. There's Cheam, which is kind of in a Korean borough.
Yeah, and Jason, do you know what Cheam means in Korean?
I probably should.
Yeah.
I know No, go on.
It means acupuncture, or like
I didn't know
the
that.
needles that they use to do acupuncture. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
has it not got another meaning? Because it seems like I've heard of it. So I'm not saying that's not good enough.
You might have heard of dongchim, which is the thing that children do to like poke you in the butt.
Oh yeah. Maybe that's I don't think that's what I've heard of.
That's another thing.
Yeah. Well, that's that's really well. That's my bit. So there's a couple of sort of one really light-hearted thing there. But I must say, what he does with the channel, I didn't actually mention this, but because he's retired working for you, all his proceeds from YouTube go to help the people in Thailand who are struggling, and he does a pay it forward every single month. And the good thing is he's now in Canada, and obviously Tim, being a fellow Canadian, will probably be interested in that.
Right.
But he's hoping to get back to Korea as well at some point, so he's going to be sort of country hopping, be nomady.
Yeah, well, hopefully someday we will be able to give back to the people of Korea, just as he does for the people of Thailand.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what could be done. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, well...
Anyway, so the main subject of this episode is my interview with Diya.
Yes.
From Diya on Korea. Her full name is Diya Mitra. And
lovely person.
A lovely person. We've known her for a number of years, maybe going back to 2013 or so, in fact, around there, maybe earlier.
Yeah, if you listen to the couple of shows ago, we talk about how we met her.
Yeah.
I think, we covered...
we introduced a little bit more about her.
Yeah.
But do you want to just briefly mention her website, where people can find her?
Yeah, well, she's Diya on Korea is how she's known, and it's basically that for. So you basically type in
diyaonkorea.com.
Yeah, it's got a nice ring to it.
Right, and you can also find some of her articles on Korea.net.
That's right.
And I think I might mention this in the interview.
Yeah, there are some things covered to do with this. She's very well known in this kind of in the Korean culture field.
She's active on social media as well. You can probably find her on Instagram. Diya on Korea.
Yeah, she's a tunist as well. Webtoonist, is that what the word for being?
Yeah,
doing webtoons?
So webtoonist. Yeah, that's a good.
Maybe
one.
That's it. But yeah, no. I hope you. Shall we go straight into the interview then? So I think.
Yeah. So we'll follow up with you after the interview.
And one last thing. Oh yeah, there might. We had to. We'll talk about this afterwards, but we had to do some engineering, some sound and engineering. So I hope you'll find it to your eardrums taste. So
right,
speak to you in a minute.
Hello, so this is Timothy Holm, talking for the Not So Korean podcast, and with me today is Diya from Diya on Korea, and she also works for Korea.net, writing articles and doing her own cartoons. Sorry for the dogs in the background. Anyway, yes, so could you please introduce yourself a little bit, Diya, about what you do and how you got involved with Korean culture in the first place?
So, hi, my name is Diya Mitra. I run a website which is called Diya on Korea, and I trying to think about when I started getting interested in Korean culture. So it began when I worked for a coffee company that should remain nameless, and at the time there were a lot of Koreans actually working in, and this was in London. And through them, obviously, as you get to know your colleagues, I became very good friends with one of them. And I started learning about Korea and Korean culture. And when I say that, I got interested in the films and the food, and those were the main things. And when I started watching the films, I was like, oh, this is quite interesting. And I can't remember some of the names of the films because I'm terrible at names. But some of them were like My Sassy Girl, those older films. And it was like this very sweet, innocent culture. I know that's not a way of summing it up. And I think from there, I went over to Korea. So as they do, a lot of Koreans come here to live and learn English for 2 years maximum, maximum, and then they go back. And then my friend said, Diya, why don't you come over to Korea? I said, yeah, sure. And I then decided to go. And then when I went there, I just completely fell in love with everything, and they were so friendly, like her family, everyone, and it was just really interesting to be there. And this was like 2007 that I went across. So, and I went to Busan. So Busan was my first place that I, went there to visit. And afterwards, I came back thinking I have to learn the language, because when I was out there, I had very surface conversations with people, and they were trying their best to ask me in English what I liked, what was my favorite color. Yeah, so we are in a park. It's a lovely sunny day, and we're doing this podcast. And this dog, I don't actually know what breed it is, has become very drawn to us and continues to sit next to us. So you may hear a lot of barking in the background, and I'm sure he's agreeing with everything I'm saying. So that's why. But in terms of being in Busan, I've completely lost what I said, if you remember. No, okay, so yes. And so when I was having conversations with my friends, it was very like on the surface, and we couldn't have deeper conversations. It was more like specifically about what's your favorite color.
Okay. What's your favorite dog?
What's your favorite dog? What music do you like? And I felt that they were making an effort to talk to me in English, and I didn't know very much. I didn't know any Korean. So when I came back, when I came back to UK, I then enrolled in SOAS's Korean language program. Yeah, so with the intention of learning Korean.
Yeah, so just at the moment we're in a park in the middle of Soho, where there's a lot of people and a lot of animals. And actually right outside the park, there is a huge queue for K-pop posters. So there's lots of people waiting to get these K-pop posters, apparently. And we're not sure why they're so popular, but, there's a lot of BTS fans out there and other groups, so I guess that's the reason. Blackpink. How about you, Diya? Are you a fan of K-pop, or what do you think about it?
So I would be lying if I said no, because I do have like occasional couple of songs on my phone. And yeah, I like K-pop. I understand that it's like, I'm not a huge fan. So for example, like you were saying, there were people queuing up outside. Some actually have been queuing since 11, and it's like 3 hours later. So I don't think I would find myself in that position to be like that much of a fan. But I do like their songs, but I know that there's more than just K-pop to Korea.
So what aspects of Korea interest you the most in general?
Yeah, so I think that's a really hard question for me to ask, because since I fell in love with the country, there's so many layers to it. There's a lot of stuff that I know, a lot of stuff that I don't know, a lot of stuff that I find controversial, and but it's about, for me, it's the history, it's the language and the food, but it's also the people. So whenever I visited Korea, I've always made like really good friends, and there's a countless number of people who I've met that I continue to stay in touch with. And for example, I was going across to Busan, so this was probably my third or fourth trip going back, because I loved it so much. And I was sitting next to this one guy on the plane, and we didn't talk to each other throughout the flight from London to Seoul. And then from Seoul, because I was on the way to Busan, so then I had to catch the connecting flight to Busan. But then we had to take you get off at the airport in Seoul, and then you take a bus, and then to Gimpo, and so I found that I was actually the same guy that I was sitting with for 9 hours that I did not talk to on the plane was actually on the way, he was going to Busan as well. So then we ended up talking, and then now he's like become a really good friend of mine. That because he was living in London, and he was really interested in food and trying to bring food out over here. So it's just the nature of how you meet people, and then how you continue to be friends with them. Because I think Koreans, maybe this is a very generalized way of saying this. They're very, if you become very interested in their culture and you know a bit about the food, there's just a bond that you form with them. Yeah. So. It's a really hard question to answer, yeah. And every time someone asks me that, it will always be different. But I think there is, Korea has this wonderful, modern feel about it, but at the same time it's very traditional and it's very cultured, and there's all these two elements to it. And there's also one of the stories when I first went over to Korea that I found out about when my friend was taking me around Korea and Busan and all these places, and she was showing me, like, she was being a very good tour guide at the time, because it was my first trip. Afterwards she was like, yeah, you know Korea, you don't need me to show you about anything. We went to Gimhae, and then there I learned about the story of a princess, an Indian princess, like 200 years ago.
I think I heard about that.
Yeah, and apparently she fell in love with the Korean king, and then they married, and they had so this is meant to be a myth, but they actually say that there's actual proof, there's certain stones or something that have formed, that have come to Korea that were not originally in Korea, but they were in India, and there was something to do with a fish pattern, something to do with the art, that again wasn't in Korea, but that has probably come across from India. So I thought that was fascinating, because I'm originally Indian. If anyone is listening, I don't think I introduced myself in that way, but yeah. So I found that very fascinating, and then there was something also that had similarities across Indian and Korean culture. So when you reach the age of 100 days when you're born, they have a rice party, I think, for all children, and then they place in front of you some objects to the child, whether it's a pen, it's money, or something that represents land, and the child reaches out and picks whatever is fascinating to them, and when they pick that then symbolizes what they're going to become later in life, and that's something very similar that we have in India as well. So I just found the similarities sometimes very interesting, and yeah, so that was something else that drew me to the culture. And also it's quite a family orientated society, which India is as well. Yeah, again, it's very difficult for me to probably answer this in one way. There's so many answers I will give, why I like Korea, what fascinates me about Korea, and because it's something that I always feel drawn to, and whenever I go on holiday there, I feel very refreshed. It's a place where I can just be. I don't have to be anyone else. I know that sounds a bit strange to say, but I can just blend into the background, even though I'm not really from Korea. But it's just a place I can really relax and rest. So.
That's interesting. Yeah, because for me also, I feel comfortable whenever I go to Korea, and I don't exactly know the reason why, because there's no specific reason why I should feel that way, but I just do, right? Yeah, so I feel some sort of connection with it, and yeah, I assume you do as well. And so, how did you get involved with Korea.net, and when did you start doing your comic strips or your cartoons, however you want to call them?
So at this stage, I was constantly going out to Korea almost every year, and when I'd come back from Korea the first time, second time, I then started learning about the Korean Cultural Center, and I can't remember exactly when they started. And then I would be like, oh wow, this is an outlet for me. I can go there and find out a bit more about my, this place that I've become really interested in. And I met a couple of people who were bloggers there, and they had won a trip recently, so they were blogging for Koreanet, I think, at the time, and it was quite early on before the honorary reporter program. And I think through doing all of this, they had won a trip to go out to Korea, and I was like, oh wow, this is really cool. Maybe I can somehow fund my interest and passion at the same time by going to Korea. So I started some random blog, and it was called Adventures of Countess at the time, and I was thinking about moving out to Korea actually to teach English, which is another story. I can get into that slightly later, because I never really went through with it. I mean, there's a number of reasons. So I did the CELTA and everything, but when I started the blog, it was called Adventures of Countess, and I started writing about Korea. Then I found out about Koreanet, and then I looked online and I applied for the program, and they selected me, and I was like, oh, wow, this is so great. And then I decided to change my blog. It was actually the suggestion of a friend. She was like, well, you're writing about Korea. Your name is Diya. and you can see where this is rhyming. Yeah. Oh, and she's like, why don't you call it Diya on Korea? And I was like, yeah, because I am writing about Korea, and it's yeah. So that was where the initial blog started. And then when I became an honorary reporter, I think this was in 2014, at the same time I was reading like comic strips online, and there is one called My Korean Husband. I don't know if you've ever read that, and it's about so an Australian woman, she married a Korean, and it was so she basically talked about her experiences through the cartoon form. And I was like, wow. And I haven't never like formally studied animation, but I always would doodle when I was younger. I would draw in the margins of my textbooks about like small little cartoons. I always wanted to be a cartoonist, but I never really went down that road. Then I thought, hey, why don't I put this passion of Korea that I have? And I've had a lot of funny stories, and a lot of the things that I draw about actually do happen to me in real life. They may be exaggerated forms. I mean, like there is one of the picnic that I drew of you. Yeah. And it's just like, oh, maybe I can use this way of, instead of writing like everyone else, because at the time a lot of the Korea Honorary Net reporters were writing, and I thought, what could I do that's different and unique and has a different insight into it? So I started drawing, and that's where that sort of came about. And it's literally drawing my experiences of Korea and things that I thought would be funny and fascinating at the same time, but things that actually do happen. So, yeah.
So, since you've been doing that, what kind of feedback have you received from, your readers? And do you have fans in Korea, or are they mostly coming from England or other countries? How is it?
I think my fans are just like my family.
No.
That's it. No, that's an interesting question. I actually don't really know, because the cartoons that when I draw them, and then they go up on Korea.net. So I think it's whoever the audiences are of Korea.net. And then it's also whoever reads my blog, which I said is mostly my mom, and my dad, and yeah. But I've had like a couple of comments which I really enjoyed. So I drew one where, it's about the art. Like when you're learning a language, especially a foreign language, and you're not living in the country, it's quite hard because you only ever go for classes for like 2 hours in the week. And then the rest of the time you're speaking English, and you're not surrounding yourself. So I drew one where I was trying to like learn Korean, and one of the things, so where I was working was actually very close to the Korean embassy, and whenever I would go for coffee to a particular shop, I sometimes would hear like there would be Koreans like getting coffee, and they would be speaking the language. So I'd always be like, oh, this is a great way to learn. I'll start eavesdropping. So I drew this cartoon because it really did happen, where every time I was in London, when I went out and about and I heard Koreans talking, I was like, oh, this is a great way to learn. So I did one where it was just me eavesdropping into like people's conversations and thinking, this is a great way to learn. And I got like a lot of feedback from people saying, oh, this is great, I'm going to use this as a way of like learning and improving your listening skills when you're learning a language. Because as you know, when you learn a language in a class, it's sometimes very artificial, and normally when people speak in real life, they don't ever speak like, how are you? I am fine. They speak in a very kind of linked up way, and that is the same with any language. So I thought, so this is the reason why I drew that cartoon, and people were like, yeah, this is good, and that was one of the great feedbacks I had. I mean, I've had a few, but it's more like the experience that
So what are your plans for the future? Like, do you want to keep doing what you've been doing, or do you want to expand into other areas, or what kind of subjects do you want to focus on in the future?
So that's, I think, so the main thing for me at the moment is having like a schedule. So like I know a lot of like webtoonists, or people who post on Instagram, or cartoonists, they always do like a story every Monday or Tuesday, and I'm not so disciplined. That's one of my challenges, and I tend to spend a lot of like time on background work, so I try and focus on the detail, and I'm trying to learn from other webtoonists or cartoonists where they simply just focus on the images themselves. So there's a lot of work that I want to do around that in terms of increasing my quickness, and at the same time, just to say on the cartoon front, I want to increase my proficiency, I suppose, but at the same time, because I think of a lot of like funny scenarios that are based again on reality, and like how can I put them out there very quickly. But I try, as I said, I focus a lot on the background detail, and I want to keep doing that. But my main focus is to make sure, like, for example, every 2 weeks I have a cartoon up, so that I try and build like a steady audience, or like also just for me, I become a bit more disciplined. But it's just nothing at the moment in terms of the future, just focusing on that. Just to say on the other side, I did do something very different for the Kimjang Festival, or KBCE, and this was I think she's the director, Justina Jang. So she approached me and said, could you do some drawings around kimchi for us? And I think it was Philip Gelman that might have put me in touch with Justina. And then we had a conversation, and this was actually pre-COVID times, and they were saying, is there a way that you can draw kimchi? Is there a way that you can illustrate kimchi for children, and like how the fermentation process happens? And I was like, yeah, sure. And that was actually a really good experience, because I never knew very much about the fermentation process of kimchi, and then it was trying to simplify that in a way that was very interesting for kids. So when I first did that, that was really good, and that resulted in a book that they put out for the project, and I enjoyed that. But that was a different style of illustration that I'd never done before. And then I think I did something in addition to that for the following festival, the Harvest Festival. Thank you. And I was thinking, this is like a different form of illustration that I'd never done, but I was improving all the time, and I got a lot of Justina said that it was really well received, and I'm always about improving, because I think with anything you ever do, and whatever passion it is, the more that you do, the better you become, and it's always that. So I look at my earlier drawings that I did. One was of my brother, who actually, it was a true story, he came to my house and finished my kimchi. When I illustrated it, I look back on it, I'm like, oh my god, it's like, that's such a. And I think a lot of people who ever do this kind of work or anything, they always look back at their earlier work and maybe cringe slightly. But it's always about improving, so I think I can only get better if I continuously do that. So.
Okay, excellent. So that was my relatively brief interview with Diya. It was actually cut short a little bit because of rain, so we had to run away from the park to get some shelter. But anyway, I got, a fair amount of questions that I wanted to ask her, but I still have so many more that I could have asked her. So I'm hoping to do another interview with her in the near future, and she said she'd be open to that. So please look forward to more from Diya in the future on this podcast.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it anyway, especially that was really good. The questions and the answers, and the questions and the answers from the dogs as well. That were barking away.
I hope the dogs didn't get in the way of your enjoyment of the interview too much. Yeah.
No, that's fine. But it was I found it really interesting. She's a lovely individual anyway, and she's she's very sort of down to earth, and I will say actually the comparison she made with India and Korea with community and family and stuff, and I can't relate to that. I'm not Korean or Indian, but when I've been to both those countries, I can see what she's saying. I can I can try and imagine it anyway. And also what she was saying about safety, and feeling at home or feeling safe. And when I go to Korea, and you've lived there, it's something I do feel when I'm there. I feel automatically safe, and not just. when I first went there, I think I knew that it was a safe place to be.
Yeah,
but there's something there's something in the air. I don't know what it is.
You mean
maybe that's just me.
The crime rate is quite low.
Yeah, the gun laws as well. I mean, there's loads of stuff, but there. I mean, of course, there is crime. Yes, but I don't know. Maybe it's just the people's personas and the people's respect in some they've got respect to quite a large degree, but obviously there's other things beneath that.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we could go deeper with that subject.
Yes, definitely.
As well,
we probably will another time.
But I hope that people, if you found this interview interesting, anyone listening out there, I'd like you to join us on social media, and please send us your comments or any further questions you might have for Diya. I'm sure she'd be happy to answer some more questions.
Yeah, in fact, whether it's your question or ours, I mean, they can be put to her in a future interview, which she's happy to do. Please feel free to drop us any questions.
Right.
And we normally finish this section off. Well, we normally finish the podcast off with some various bits of news. There was quite a bit of news this week, but we're just going to direct you to the London Korean Links Facebook group, where a lot of that news has been posted, and also, or more importantly, additionally, is the LondonKoreanLinks.net website, because that is, it doesn't really have the kind of the news posted by everybody, but it has things posted by Philip Goman and his mini team. Mm-hmm. So we're going to leave it with that really, and we hope you enjoyed this one.
Yeah, it was really interesting talking to Diya and getting some interesting insights from her.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, we'll play out with the song that we've been playing in with and out with in every show so far. That's by the band or the duo Kaya. Their rendition of New Arirang on their album Korean Breeze. And
and now we'll say 안녕히
계세요.